Welcome, everyone. My name is Sarah Ray from the Bloomfield Public Library. Thank you for joining us today. This is another Memory Care Series program in partnership with the Avon Free Public Library, Canton Public Library, and the Avon Senior Center. So thank you to all of our partners, and thank you to Kathleen from the Department of Banking to update us and inform us today. Turn it over to you, Kathleen.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everybody. My name is Kathleen Titsworth. I am the outreach coordinator with the Connecticut Department of Banking. Very glad to be here and to join you today. I've done a few of Bloomfield's virtual programs like this, so I was very happy to be invited up back for this program. So I'm going to jump right in and share my screen and get right into our presentation. Let's say, there we go. There we go. Banking scams and cognitive impairment. All right. So as Sarah mentioned, I'm with the Department of Banking. We're a state agency. We are regulatory. Some people confuse us with a bank or a financial institution because of our name. But we regulate state chartered banks and credit unions. We regulate mortgage lenders and brokers, anyone that services your mortgage. We regulate debt collectors. If somebody's collecting on a debt in the state, they have to be properly licensed and regulated. Money transmitters, check cashers, and investment professionals. So basically, I like to say most people that handle your money would be licensed or regulated by my agency. And so our outreach program is part of our mission of helping protect all consumers and investors in the state of Connecticut. We don't want anybody to lose their money. We try to keep the banks and credit unions and all of our licensees, on the up and up, doing everything properly. But beyond that, it's really up to us to be educated and to do everything we can to keep scammers from getting our money, from losing any of our finances to any type of financial exploitation. So this is why it's so important. You're so lucky that your library sees value in this and has frequent programs like this. I do want to, this is an interesting program for me because it has to do with mild cognitive impairment, a little bit different than the banking world, right? That's a little bit in sort of public health, health and human services area. So interestingly, our agency had participated in a program called the Elder Investment Fraud and Financial Exploitation Prevention Program, and we called it EFI. That's our logo right there on the screen. This was actually developed through Baylor College of Medicine out of Texas and in coordination with the Investor Protection Institute. Dr. Robert Rausch, who I had the pleasure of meeting on several occasions. I went to a couple of conferences and meetings that he was at. He is the director of Baylor College's Texas Consortium, their Geriatric Education Center. So a lot of this information here is coming from directly from a doctor, from medical professionals. So I'm really proud to be able to share a lot of this with all of you. So first of all, let's talk about fraud. That's the point of this is we don't want to lose our money to fraud. Unfortunately, the Federal Trade Commission collects data. And last year, they received 2.4 million reports of fraud to the extent of $8.8 billion in losses to people. Much of this is unreported, as we know, so it's very likely that the figure is a lot higher. That's a lot of money for people to lose. And really, on average, it's probably not a lot per person. I think sometimes, if a millionaire loses a lot of money, that kind of, may skew the average. But on average, if I lose everything that's in my checking account right now or in my savings, or if anyone loses what's in their retirement, that's a big deal. That's huge. The top frauds reported last year, not surprisingly, and we're going to talk about some of these, imposter scams. These are the people that call pretending to be someone else, whether it's the government, whether they pretend to be your bank or credit union, whether it's an email from something that looks like your financial institution or even the post office or Amazon. Online shopping is something we need to be careful about. Pop-ups on our computer, those of us that use social media, oftentimes get ads for things and the price just can't be beat. So a lot of people want to just click right on that and make that purchase. Unfortunately, a lot of times those are fraudulent. Prizes, sweepstakes, lotteries, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Investment fraud is also a really big one. I believe that results in the largest on average amount of losses. Then there's also business and job opportunity fraud and scams, which recently I spoke with a group of students, and those are a lot of the pop-ups they're seeing on social media or job opportunities. So I wanted to make sure to share this with you. This is a lot of money, and we want to combat that. Now, interestingly, according to the Federal Trade Commission, younger people do report losing money more often. So from ages 20 to 29, we saw 43%, whereas they took the group of 70 to 79 was just seeing about 23%. However, when those over age 70 did have a loss, that amount was much higher, as you could see on the chart there. So this is something we all want to acknowledge and protect ourselves. Okay. So I just want to, since we're going to be talking about something called mild cognitive impairment, and the idea of how that could affect our finances, I just want to share some terms, and this kind of makes sense while we're talking about this topic. So financial capacity is our ability to make and execute decisions that are consistent with our personal preferences regarding our finances, with our values. So my financial capacity may be different than Sarah's, may be different than anyone else here on this, because perhaps one of you is a lot more educated. Maybe, I'm in outreach. My degree is communication. That's my area of expertise. Whereas somebody who's an accountant, maybe somebody who is a financial planner or an investment advisor, may have a different ability, but that's our financial capacity. Okay. And this is something that this mild cognitive impairment could affect, and something we want to watch out for. And then there's undue influence. So this is when somebody else is going to use some kind of trust over us to gain control over our decision making. And it often involves financial decision making, financial exploitation. One of the things we talk about a lot is this concept of trust abuse. A caretaker, a family member, they see that maybe either the person that they're in charge of taking care of, or a family member, maybe a nephew, maybe there's somebody and he's having his own personal problems, and he sees that his aunt is kind of maybe not as sharp as she used to be. And so he starts spending a little more time with her and starts to see, oh, she's leaving her checkbook laying around, or she's just giving me her wallet, letting me run up to the store for groceries. She'll never notice when I spend it on other things for myself. And well, I got away with a little bit. Now I'm going to start spending more. And oh, if I offer to go to the bank, now I can access her bank account. So sometimes this happens with undue influence. And so these are terms I want to make sure to share with you. Okay. And then of course, financial fraud. What is financial fraud? So I went right to the United States Department of Justice. So they define it as acts that intentionally and knowingly deceive the victim by misrepresenting, concealing, or omitting facts about promised goods, services, or other benefits. So it's basically for the purpose of monetary gain. Fraud is when you have an expectation that, for example, you are clicking on a link and that I am going to my bank's website, or that I am clicking on a link that's going to take me to Amazon, and that I'm going to be able to make purchases with my credit card or make a legitimate purchase, and then I'm going to get what I'm expecting. Okay. When there is this intention to deceive, that is where fraud comes in. Okay. So let's jump into what now that we know those things, let's jump into what mild cognitive impairment, or MCI, is, okay? And this is when someone, they're showing symptoms of some changes in their memory, not to the extent that they need someone to take care of them at some point. I don't want you to mistake this with Alzheimer's disease or even dementia. It's different than that. There's changes in their memory. Oftentimes they're even aware that I'm slipping a little bit. I don't have that sharpness that I knew that I had. Perhaps I'm having trouble with a word, trying to get the right word for that. And someone reminds me of it. Oh, okay, thank you. Or that remote control. Now, I still have trouble with my remote. This is not, sometimes people worry that it may be some kind of impairment. There is a difference. There's forgetting where we left our keys, and then there's forgetting what the key is for. And that there's a really big difference in some of these things. And this mild cognitive impairment is really maybe sort of that gray area in between. Like I said, it doesn't really affect your daily life. And certainly not everyone that has mild cognitive impairment is necessarily going to develop dementia. Okay, I don't want to worry people. These are, and again, I'm not a doctor. I may not have a lot of, if people have questions on this, I may not be able to answer this, but this is something that certainly could be raised with if you're concerned about a loved one, that could be raised with a medical professional. Okay. So to make this a little more clear, I wanted to include this set of symptoms that has to do with mild cognitive impairment. Okay, so a person that has MCI may have mild problems with some of these things. Their memory, like I said, forgetting recent things or repeating a question. And again, I don't want to confuse this with dementia or Alzheimer's. It's often, I hate to say sort of a lighter version of it, but I forget things. I forget when, I sometimes forget the dates of things, but it's a little, it's sort of, it's when you realize, when the person kind of realizes, I should have known that. Okay. How about reasoning, planning, or problem solving, struggling with thinking things through, attention, becoming very easily distracted. That certainly could be a sign of this mild impairment. Trying to have a conversation with someone and they're quickly distracted by something else that's going on there. I mentioned trying to get the right word, language, trying to get that word. Again, it happens to me. We all sometimes struggle to find that word we're trying to think of. I think with MCI, it's happening more frequent. We could say that. And a lot of times it's a simple word that you're trying to grasp. And often a visual issue, juggling distance, stairs can be a little bit of a problem with that. So these are just things, just to know when we're talking about MCI. All right. But most importantly, the reason why we wanted to bring it up today is the coordination with your finances, the effect that this could have on handling your finances. So as we say here, and I need to move my little Zoom thing around, you'll see my mouse moving a little bit. While it's easy to see how someone with dementia, certainly may have issues with handling money. My mom is an example of that. My mom has dementia now, and I'm her power of attorney. I noticed she was, I was collecting her mail, and there were some issues with checks she was mailing, and her checkbook, I noticed a lot of cross-offs and things. And I just kind of had a gentle conversation with my mom and I said, Ma, do you want me to help you with this? My dad had passed about 5 years earlier, and she was starting to have some issues, and it turned out that it was dementia. She was starting to have dementia. And so this poor decision-making was starting. Now, we could even see this sometimes with people with mild cognitive impairment. So that could be something you spot with a loved one. Maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's somebody, just a family member that and say casually you start talking about things like finances, and that's when you may be able to see that there's some issues going on where they're driving just fine, they're cooking, they're have a nice clean home, and everything is still going on great, but maybe somewhere with the finances things are slipping. Missing bills, sort of that cognitive is affecting the understanding of writing checks, maybe even taking out money and paying for things. So they may become less risk averse, which means not quite understanding what they're giving their money to, for example, an investment, and thinking, oh, that this person's saying I could double my money, and that sounds like a great idea, where maybe a year ago, hey, and the investments were fine, retirement, everything was under control and no need to touch it, but then suddenly thinking, well, maybe I can do more, maybe there's more things I could do with that. People who develop MCI are actually 4 times more likely to make financial mistakes. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And unfortunately, also at an increased risk of becoming victims of financial fraud or abuse. Okay, so we want to look out for our loved ones, family members, friends that could be starting to have that. And I know the definition of it was tough to sort of put a strict finger on as compared to dementia or Alzheimer's, but it's definitely when you see these things start to happen with a loved one, you maybe want to start keeping a closer eye on them, and if it's possible, with their finances. So we say many aspects of normal aging can contribute to a vulnerability to financial fraud and exploitation. We can all be at risk, any of us. Changes in your ability to make important decisions. If this happens, it can leave you vulnerable to financial fraud, to someone who may not have the same financial capacity as you and who may want to handle your affairs differently than you actually would. Okay. And finally, we mentioned the population of older adults is increasing. It's growing every day. The number of, those of us over 50, and the number of those over 65, and then even over, and beyond. It's growing every day. And unfortunately, it makes us more vulnerable to these people that want to swindle us. All right. Now, having said all this, all right, we want to remember this is not a generality for all. Here, let me grab my Zoom again. It's certainly not this. As I mentioned earlier, people even with MCI will not necessarily develop anything further, such as dementia or Alzheimer's. We may have a slower reaction time, slower recall, may take us longer to do things, but it's not, like I said, this is not a generality for all older people. So we don't want there to be any type of assumption that because I'm getting older, people are going to assume this about me. Okay. It certainly isn't at all. And I mentioned here, this sort of came from an AARP study. What we do and how active we stay and how social we are, the stimulation we get can certainly delay this type of slowing. So it's really important for us. We heard through COVID, the idea of isolation could be tough for a lot of people and could really increase some type of MCI or a cognitive decline that may not have been if this person stayed more social. All of you here attending a library event and staying educated, it's wonderful because it's so important for us to stay stimulated. And sometimes it's physical. Unfortunately, it could be sometimes it's a physical condition. We're just not able to get out let's say we have family members that are able to help us out, but we rely on them. It could put us a little bit at risk because if we're home and we're there without another person to sort of bounce things off of, it could leave us a little more susceptible. I know I've gotten calls, and to be able to speak to my husband about it, or to come into work and to talk to friends, it helps before reacting to things. But sometimes when we're home alone and, we get that call and they want an answer right away, and we don't have somebody to immediately, share this with, the best thing for us to do is always to hang up the phone. But, sometimes with a little bit of a cognitive, and if somebody gets us and they get us a little confused on the phone, that's where the vulnerability could happen. And unfortunately, it leaves us as targets. So we're going to talk about ways to help ourselves if that is the case. Okay. So that whole portion of the presentation really was kind of defining mild cognitive, the effect it could have on our finances. I want us to all keep in mind loved ones or family members, and just to know what to watch out for. Okay. So now we're going to go into some of these common banking scams and frauds that we see. And if you've been on a program with me before, some of these are going to sound familiar, but it's always, I always say it's worth repeating a lot of these. And unfortunately, these scammers are using a lot of the same types of scams they've been using for a long time. Sometimes a variation. The government imposter scam, or when these calls come in, they may be a text or an email on our phones or devices, but oftentimes it's a telephone call. So with many of these scams, the first thing I'm going to say to all of you, is try not to answer your phone if you get a lot of calls that are either robocalls or scams, or people calling under fraudulent manners. Because if we don't answer the phone, how can they get us? We can't be a victim if we don't answer that phone. A lot of people rely on caller ID, but unfortunately, these scammers, they know how to use caller ID. They know how to use different apps or illegal ways to make their number come up as either a legitimate number, so maybe the government or maybe a financial institution, or even a local number. So we need to watch out when we answer our phone. And many people rely on their phones to tell them it's a spam. A lot of phones are set up that way. Unfortunately, we can't even trust that all the time too. So I just say, if you get a lot of calls that are spam, I sort of challenge everybody to maybe not answer their phone for a while. Screen all your calls. Okay. So again, the government imposter scam, these days could be Medicare calls. I know it's open enrollment for Medicare. I see a lot of commercials. There's a lot of marketing out there oh, here, let me admit this person. I'm not sure if you're able to, Sarah. But they're promoting different Medicare options and plans and everything. And I say to people, if you have a great plan that you've been satisfied with, ignore all the commercials, ignore the calls. I get calls from my mother, and I can vouch that they could be a little confusing. Sometimes the way legitimate companies market, I would say, could be exploitation in the way that they market. So, we just want to be careful with any personal information we're giving out. Okay. In fact, we really shouldn't be giving any over the phone unless it's a telephone call that we've made. Okay. And I can clarify that later if that would help. This tech support scam, oftentimes it's a call from someone pretending to be a computer technician, insinuating that there's an issue with your computer or your tablet. Sometimes it's even a direct pop-up. And again, you want to ignore those all, because think about this. If you have one of your appliances is broken, are you going to get a call from Maytag or from GE to tell you that there's an issue and they're offering to help you? Absolutely not. Gone are the days of these good Samaritans just calling us just to help us because they know we're having an issue with something. Microsoft or Apple will never call us, do a pop-up on our device, or text or email us. that there's an issue with our device. Never. Okay. Always hang up the phone. Always turn off your device if you get anything like this. So I mentioned that sweepstakes lotteries is one of those top 5 frauds that the Federal Trade Commission sees. This scam plays on our emotion. The scammers are hoping we will be so excited that we won't think about the fact that we have to pay in order to receive a prize. Well, what kind of prize is that? You know, let's say a raffle, we buy the raffle from somebody. So there's our little payment right there. But once you win that prize, whether it's a trip, a cruise, a sweepstakes, you never have to pay. Okay. So just remember that. That is your biggest red flag with this. The grandparent scam. Unfortunately, this one preys upon the emotions that grandparents have for their grandchildren. It varies. Sometimes it's most often grandma or grandpa. So you could spot that if you're called something else. But the scammers are getting savvy. If your last name is very ethnic, they might, try to use, they might say abuela, or they might say, I have friends that are Lebanese. They might say Jiddo, which is, so you never know, meme, right? That's what a lot of people are. So, or they may find some information through social media or some other way where they have a little bit of information that is accurate. And it makes you think, well, if they know this, this can't be a scam if they know that my sister lives in Florida, that it couldn't just be a coincidence. Again, the biggest red flag for this is somebody is calling you out of the blue, getting you upset, and needing money, needing you to send money or wire money. Okay. Always tell somebody. And that's one thing the scammers tell us too. They say, don't tell anybody, or they pretend they're your grandchild. They say, don't tell mom or dad. Those are some of the biggest red flags. Okay, this romance scam is one that unfortunately affects more people than we realize. I recently met a woman literally just 2 weeks ago when I did a program. I was at a program in East Hartford, and she came up to me afterwards and she shared with me that she met somebody on a dating site. She is in her late 70s, and she's been sending him a lot of money, and she is caught up in it. She's actually in debt. She's maxed out about 10 credit cards, and a lot more. She is probably about $60,000 in debt, and she had already paid out quite a bit of money. And so I got her hooked up with a state trooper. So the Connecticut State Police is an excellent resource. And we actually got some people from DSS involved, because in this example, in this specific situation, the more we talked to the woman, she definitely had symptoms of mild cognitive impairment. She really did. The state trooper and I met her at her home. She offered us something to drink. She had a lovely home. We sat down with her for a while, and it wasn't until some of the questions we asked, we could tell there was a little more than just forgetfulness. She was, there was some cognitive issues going on there that really concerned us. So we contacted a social service person, and they came and spoke with her, and they're helping her out. So she's getting some help. She's going to get herself out of the scam. We're going to work with some debt consolidation companies and hopefully, get her on the right path. But unfortunately, she lost a lot of money. And I want to share with you, this is an example that's going on right now here in a town not far from where you and I live. So it's something that happens. We really need to notice when someone we know has some cognitive issues. And if it's not a family member, maybe it's sharing it with one of their family members. And, it's tough. It's tough when it comes to people's finances, but the last thing we'd want is anyone to lose money to any type of a scam. So the romance scam was one that definitely the cognitive impairment preys upon. Debt collection. I like to share this because this is a call I had gotten. My mother, as I mentioned earlier, those of you that just joined us, my mom has dementia. But before I started helping her and kind of took over all her finances and took that burden off her shoulders, and she was still living at home and taking care of things. She had a lot of credit cards and a lot of store cards. And I received a call in the last couple of years saying that they were a debt collector collecting on a dress barn bill. And I knew she had a dress barn card. So I said, oh, thank you very much. I said, I want to take care of this. Let's, please send me the paperwork. And she claimed that the paperwork was already sent and that it had been so long that it was already going into litigation unless I paid by credit card immediately. And that's when my red flags went up, because I said, I am not paying. I don't know who you are. You called me. It's just a phone number on my caller ID. You say you're calling from Atlanta, Georgia, but I don't know that. You could be calling from another country. She was not happy that I was saying these things, but she also didn't know that I worked at the Connecticut Department of Banking. But even if I didn't, these should be red flags for you. You never should find yourself pulling out your credit card or bank card to give to somebody who is calling you out of the blue in the middle of the day, making claims that you cannot verify. Okay, that's the key. And then there's investment fraud. That's also one of the top 5 frauds that we saw the Federal Trade Commission list as one of their top frauds of 2022. You think you can trust this dapper man in a suit looking like he's off to a great event? Well, think again. This is Bernie Madoff, probably the most infamous person. Well, until this Sam Friedman person that was just arrested, if you're watching the news, with the cryptocurrency scams. But Bernie Madoff will still be one of the most infamous. He stole millions from his clients, and he had so much money already that who knows why he did this, but it ruined him. He ruined himself and it ruined his family. He committed classic investment fraud, promising quick profits, guaranteeing high returns, No investment broker or financial planner will ever guarantee. And if they do, you run the other way because they're committing fraud. All investments carry a risk. You should have written information and read it and make sure that amount is what you expect it is. And if there's anything in what they send you that you don't understand, you have every right to call them and have them explain it to you in plain language. Okay. They should never be using high pressure sales tactics. And like anything, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. When it comes to investments, if you're using a broker, if you've used, for your retirement, if you're very satisfied with where everything is, there's no reason that somebody that calls you or even that you run into at the senior center or anywhere in town at a club, a lot of times they sort of infiltrate and try to become friends with people. And then all of a sudden they start, spreading information about these great investments and all this money they've made. Anything like this that's too good to be true usually is. Okay. So and it's a top fraud. So I want to make sure to share that with all of us. And again, as I mentioned earlier, with mild impairment, mild cognitive issues, we may have worked in the field and we know a good investment when we see one. But if we've got some cognitive issues happening, I hate to say like the term we're not as sharp, but it happens and it could happen, not to everybody. But we may, at a certain point, even at a point in my life, my husband and I we're really less risky. We've become a lot more conservative with investments because we don't want to lose anything. When you're younger, you could be a little more risky. The older we get, we really shouldn't get involved with risky investments, no matter how savvy we think we are. Okay. Something to keep in mind. I also want to share these I mentioned these scams and frauds could come in the form of emails. This is an example of one I got from the post office. This is not a valid post office email address, certainly. It looks pretty legitimate because of the logo and the links and everything, but I never gave the post office my email. I never gave them permission to email me. And it says up at the top that they couldn't make the delivery. Well, when my mailman can't deliver something, he leaves me a little form in my mailbox, or maybe sometimes right on the door, and I have to go to the post office and pick it up, maybe even sign for it. All right. Never, never click on a link from a company like the post office or Amazon or anything like that, that is insinuating that there's an issue that we need to click here to get resolved. Another example is email spoofing, which is coming from somebody who's actually a friend of yours. Now, in this example, Melissa is in my contact list and is supposedly sending me pictures. And she's just included them in a link. It's very odd. The simplest thing to do here is just call your friend or reach out to them and say, hey, are you trying to email me a link with pictures? 99.99999 times out of 100, they are not sending you pictures. Okay, they won't be doing it this way. I've even heard of a scam. I was in Cheshire recently at their library, and somebody shared with me a text scam that had come out from them. So their friends were all getting this text, and it was asking, their niece needed help with an issue, and they wanted them to buy gift cards and mail them to her niece's, I say that in quote, address, which was likely the address for the scammer. And she heard about it through a friend who was actually going to buy gift cards and said, I want to help you out. Let me just, I'll buy a few gift cards. And so she said, absolutely not, and ended up sending an email out to all of her, or a text, however this went out, to everyone on her contact list saying that was a scam. So there's variations of these spoofing scams. It could just be a general text scam like this that came into me that says I won a $1,000 Amazon gift card. But I never applied. I don't know who this is coming from. I'm not going to click this link because I don't know where it's going to take me, or what it might do to my computer if I click this link. That could even be worse. It could put malware or a virus on my computer. All right. And back to that again, when we talk about mild cognitive impairment, and I had said earlier, it doesn't affect the day-to-day functions for people, but what they may find is on these devices getting a little bit maybe confused. So something like this could certainly sound like something legitimate that they want, that they think they need to do. A piece of mail could come in and say, open immediately, payment due. And it's really just a charity request, but they see it as something they have to do. So that's where the mild cognitive impairment compares to somebody that doesn't have any of that issue and sees something for what it actually is. Okay. These are my classic tips to protect yourself. Verify who is on the phone with you. If you cannot 100% verify who that is, hang up. Never give out personal information in response to these unsolicited calls, emails, or texts. Never wire, send money, or use cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is a huge red flag. Just avoid it. If anyone is trying to tell you you need to pay that way, it's a scam. Okay. Always review your statements. That's a great way to see if anything, may be happening with your finances. Maybe you didn't mean to agree to something or sign on to some marketing, but it may show up in your account statement. This had actually happened to my mother when I started helping her with her checking account. She had a reoccurring charge for $595, and it was some insurance that she didn't even know that she had. And I gather that she had it for several years. So she just didn't understand. She just didn't know it was there. Always check those account statements and even check your credit reports. Now, I have some really, really good resources, more resources when it comes to cognitive impairment and protecting your finances as well. This resource, I want to make sure the library has, if I haven't shared this already, certainly your town Department on Aging very likely has this. It's the Elder Justice Hotline that is set up through the Attorney General's office. And if you're not sure who to call, do I call the Department of Banking with this? Or maybe it's the Department of Consumer Protection, or maybe it's a federal agency I should call. I'm not really sure. Or is it a local issue? Call the hotline. And they have actually all been trained, and they have state, federal, local, all kinds of resources to help us out. I've gotten some referrals from them. So it's a great way. You can lodge complaints, even just get more information. Protective Services for the Elderly, PSE. They are our state social workers out there to help out anybody over age 60 from any type of abuse, neglect, or abandonment, and certainly any type of financial exploitation. Okay. Anyone can make referrals. You could just make calls, and what they do is they do checkups. That's as simple as that. It's not, a lot of people are always worried about calling the state. I don't want to call the state. I'm going to get somebody in trouble. Or, my neighbor, I don't know, she just doesn't seem to be herself lately, and her family lives 500 miles away. And I know they call and check up on her, but I also know she gives them she spins a good story, and she makes it sound like everything is great, but I'm not really sure. And I've tried to come over, and she won't let me in. We can call Protective Services. They knock on the door. She's a grown-up. If she doesn't want to let them in, they won't go in, but they might peek inside and, maybe take a quick sweep and see if everything looks good. If they peek inside and she has boxes up to here, and, maybe the kitchen looks like it hasn't been used in a long time, they might, really work on her, maybe come back again, maybe try other tactics to try to get her to talk to them. And the wonderful thing about referrals to Protective Services is that it's never a bad thing. Either they knock on the door, the person's perfectly fine, or maybe somebody needs a little bit of help. Maybe someone can't manage their finances and they need conservatorship because they don't have family nearby or anybody that could help them out. It's a resource I love to share. And I share it actually with banks and credit unions. If they spot any type of cognitive impairment or exploitation in their customers, they have a resource there that they can contact. Now, the Department of Banking is part of the Coalition for Elder Justice in Connecticut. I don't know if many of you know that there is this coalition in the state. Our website is elderjusticect.org, and it's agencies like my agency, the Attorney General's Office, Consumer Protection, Department on Aging, Department of Social Services, long-term care ombudsman, law enforcement, agencies on aging. I could go on. They're all part of this network. We work together, we share information, and it's all to protect all of our wonderful older adults in the state of Connecticut. We do programs and presentations similar to what I'm doing today. I have conferences, and it's just a wonderful resource for the public and for those who work in the field of elder justice. So this is my information, the Connecticut Department of Banking. Here's our website and Facebook page. Also our toll-free number, if anyone has any issues or questions. I am happy to take any questions now. Sarah, if any came through the chat, I'll leave this screen on for a few minutes, and then I can stop the screen share and we could chat a little if you like.